Well, let's talk about fans who maybe are no longer in Sports Hell. Your fan base seems to be pretty thrilled about the way things are going right now. You guys are all excited about the upcoming year. I think you're going to win 13 games next year. Yeah, go And
we're going to win 13 games
13. You're going to win 13 next year. Your defensive coordinator stepped away randomly. Keith Hayward did earlier in the week and was like, oh, okay. But I don't think that's when you lose a lot of sleep over. Whatever. Good coach, but your defense wasn't very good last season.
Yeah, I gave up 30 points a game and 300-plus yards.
All right.
So, yeah.
All right, we'll go find somebody else.
I think it was actually almost 400 total yards.
Yeah, not good. Not good, Bob. And everybody's been waiting all week. Well, who's he going to hire as his defensive coordinator? Who's Trent Bray going to go get to call the defense in his second year as a head coach? And he said, you know what? I'm going to look in the mirror, and I'm going to name myself defensive coordinator. He's going,
You're going to do it.
He's going Jerry Jones of owners. He's saying, I'm the GM too, bitch. I'm going to call the defense. And this led to a lot of takes, either pro or negative, which I shouldn't be surprised. Everybody's got a take on everything. But what was the reaction to Trent Bray saying, I will be the defensive coordinator and the head coach?
I think anybody not related to the fandom should ask themselves, if you want a real opinion, what if I told you Oregon had Taj LaPoy leave and Lanning named himself?
I would be perfectly fine with that.
You have no problems with it?
Not at all.
So I've had back and forth thoughts on this. I hate to tell you this on the air. I don't know if I really reside in one take or the other. I saw a Beaver fan that told me this is such a dire straits, cheap move that a joke of a program would make. And then the very next tweet, a fan saying, I love this, which kind of tells me everything I need to know about this. There isn't one concrete takeaway.
Is there a truth somewhere in the middle there where it likely resides?
I mean, look, it's January 15th. I got it fully transparent, did not read the Daschle story on this. So if there's an assistant here that was named, a special assistant to the coordinator, a Dwight Schrute, if you would.
No, the article.
Who's the Dwight Schrute of Oregon State's defense next year?
There's going to be
the special assistant to the defensive coordinator.
Bray said they were going to search for some sort of veteran analyst that maybe has been a head coach before and been on the defensive side.
So a Dwight Schrute.
They're going to go find a Dwight Schrute.
Okay, thank you. It's going to work itself out. He is going to be entirely committed if this stays the way it is with some new special analyst assistant guy. He's going to be the guy who coordinates the defense. I don't think he's going to take on fully in all practices, just be talking to the defense. So is this the perfect scenario? No. Does this mean they can't be good defensively and be better offensively? Also, no. I get both sides of the argument. This doesn't happen very often.
No.
Now, you said something during one of the breaks of what's the difference between him doing this and fill-in-the-blank coach who's calling plays, and my only rebuttal was technically they have a guy named offensive coordinator. Some guys give up play calling. Dillingham talked about this. He basically said it was really hard. I didn't want to give up play calling, but according to him, Arroyo called the plays.
Arroyo calls their plays, yeah.
Now, this is a little Andy Reid-esque. Dillingham's not having say in key moments.
Of course he is, yeah. Like, let's do this here. What about this? I like this look. Why don't we try this? This looks open.
But, Kelly did this. He was calling plays. They just technically had Mark Helfrich as the OC.
And Scott Frost as well.
So, I don't think this has to be a detriment to their season, their results. The defense statistically stands that it should get better. He was a good coordinator before he became the head coach. And we'll react to this, I think, more as the season goes on. It doesn't happen often, but it also doesn't mean that they can't have more success defensively while hoping the new offensive ads for Gundy don't make the offense better.
It's really funny the way that we look at some of this stuff, because when an offensive coordinator gets hired and that guy has not called plays, we almost act like, what have you even done? Like, to the point of Dillingham, this was what the reaction was when Lanning originally hired Kenny Dillingham. There was a lot of pushback of this guy was with Mike Norvell. He never even called the plays. Mike Norvell, he calls his own plays. So Dillingham's just there. He's up in the booth. He's giving you eyes. Hey, this is what they're doing with their safeties. Let's try this. He's got input on the offense, but we almost downgrade that person. And then when a head coach does it the opposite way, we want to look at it as some want to look at it as a negative. I don't understand any of the negative feedback here. I don't.
It looks cheap. I mean, let me just get out in front of it.
Your program is cheap.
Okay.
That's the situation they're in.
I'm telling you what the negative feedback is, whether it's true or not. It looks cheap. But it doesn't. It makes you kind of wonder, does he not have anybody on line two? And maybe that's where the analyst part will come in here. and you'll kind of have a pseudo co-defensive coordinator that's going to help him during practices so he can examine the entire situation.
Yes.
But if they play poorly and they lose, this is going to be looked back on and said, well, yeah, the guy's only focusing on one side. Special teams isn't great or offense is struggling.
Right.
That's going to be on him. He's the head coach.
Yeah, look, the buck stops at his desk. There's no doubt about that. I would argue the main area that they needed to show this offseason that they were not being cheap in is talent acquisition, and they have done that. They have added multiple guys from the portal. They're paying $1 million+ for a starting quarterback to come from the ACC.
1.5 mil.
They're spending a lot of money on the roster. They're getting former blue chip recruits who are looking for new homes. Like those guys don't come play at Corvallis pro bono. They're not just looking for a life raft.
But
they're getting offers and they're getting paid. Your program is paying players to come, and that's great. That's a sign of the times.
I thought DJ was there for free.
He was there for free. He never earned $1 when he was a quarterback at Oregon State. He just left Clemson and came to Oregon State to play for free for a year. That's exactly how it works with your program. But everybody else is paying people.
Malik Murphy came for 1.5.
He came for free. Yeah.
DJ Uiagalelei came for nothing.
I remember when I sourced that, how much they were paying him, and Beaver reporters like, well, actually, like, no, you're paying him. It's okay. This is what everybody does. So I think the most important thing you needed to show in the offseason was that you weren't cheap in terms of player acquisition, because that's the name of the game. Jimmys and Joes win far more than X's and O's.
Yes.
And so you got to go you've solved a little bit of that problem in the offseason. If you want to tell me your university says, hey, Trent, you were already basically calling the defense to begin with. We would rather hire an analyst at – how much does a college football analyst make? What do we think the salary is on that?
Who is it?
I don't know, but it's not $700,000. It's not $500,000.
Let me look it up.
If you're going to go hire a defensive coordinator, how much money do we think that person is going to command?
Oh, I mean, you can get one for $400 at Oregon State.
Okay. An analyst is not going to make $400,000, right?
But...
So my thought initially was just simply that this was the guy he's a defensive head coach. If Dan Lanning did this, I would have no issue with it whatsoever. And I genuinely don't see the difference between an offensive-minded head coach, which exists all over college football, running their offense and calling their plays on that side of the ball, and a defensive coach doing it for their side of the ball. I don't understand what the difference is.
So, this has got to be different now. I'm struggling to find a salary. They can range anywhere from 45 to 100,000+.
Yeah.
Depending on who. Like Butch Jones years ago was an analyst at LSU. He made $35K.
And some of the guys aren't making a lot of money because they're just getting paid because they were fired head coaches, and they're still getting paid big money, and so they just want to go help out and stay in football.
I know he's not the coordinator, obviously, but I've always kind of viewed the Oregon thing, and I gave Taj Lapoy some flowers throughout the season of like, let's give the guy a little credit, right? But I also, when I watch Oregon's defense not play well, I kind of have a natural like, is Dan Lanning...
That falls back on Lanning instead of the DC.
Well, not on Lanning. It is on Lapoy, and Lapoy is getting the blame. But I'm also wondering how much of the game plan when they lose and don't perform was Lanning a part of. But it's hard to be a part of that as the head coach.
You got a lot of responsibilities.
So, and just like offensively at USC, if USC's offense sucks, who are we blaming?
Lincoln Riley calls the plays.
I don't even know who the offensive coordinator technically is.
I have no clue. Couldn't tell you.
Right, but it's the guy who calls the plays or who's the reputation. What's the side of the ball the reputation is on?
Yeah, I chuckled at the backlash a little bit. I get that it looks cheap, and I understand that. Would it help if they hired an analyst and just gave him the label of defensive coordinator? Would that make people feel better? There are so many coaches around the country, and I don't know how many there are examples of this side where it's a defensive head coach calling their own plays. I genuinely don't know the answer to that.
Right.
But there are thousands of coaches you could look at. I mean, exaggerating, but there's a lot of coaches who are offensive-minded guys. Lincoln Riley, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin. The list goes on and on and on and on of guys who are offensive-minded head coaches who call their own plays, who run their own offense, yes, with an input from an offensive staff, but they do it on that side of the ball, and I don't understand why it's a negative for defense. But if you hire an offensive coach, which so many fan bases want, by the way, to go hire an offensive-minded head coach, we're perfectly fine with them calling one side of the ball.
Well, think about Kansas City. I mean, that's the premier example here, so it doesn't always ring true for everybody. But, is Andy Reid dabbling much in the what Steve Spagnuolo's doing defensively?
Yeah, I think he's got his own keys over on that side of the ball. You do your thing, buddy.
Spags is basically Venables. He's the co-head coach. He just coaches one side of the
I'm just handling this side, and you handle that side, and we'll operate well. So that came out yesterday. Trent Bray has named himself defensive coordinator, and then he's going to go find a Dwight Schrute for his staff to be the assistant to the defensive coordinator.
I think the couple questions that we may never get answers to is what was the staff pool financially for them? Were those resources, was it good? And, Did he just look at the landscape and not have anybody he knew or trusted enough?
Said, I think I have more faith in myself than anybody else.
Yeah, let me put this in my own hands. I was wondering during last year at the end, like, how much are you helping defensively? Because this is bad, man.
Yeah, you won 10 games a couple years ago, predominantly because of your dominant defense, and he was the guy behind that. So if I'm picking somebody to run it, I can't pick anybody better than the guy who was already there.